The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for clinical mental health treatment. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988 or head to your nearest emergency room.
Welcome to the Black People Die by Suicide 2 podcast, where we discuss all things mental health with an emphasis on suicide in the Black community. I'm your co-host, Jordan.
I'm your co-host, T-Kea.
So our guest today, she is a mental health advocate, a motivational speaker. She is the founder and president of BE Eazy, which is a community, an organization that provides community education on suicide prevention and mental health, with a focus on communities of color. And we're so excited to have her today, Lisa Daughtrey. How are you doing, Lisa?
Woo!
Wonderful. Hello, ladies. And I am so proud of you ladies as far as for this podcast. And thank you. Thank you so much for, basically putting it on the map and it providing some very informative dialogue for others to basically, listen, and we can share this on social media.
Yes, we're excited to have you. Well,
Yes.
you already know I love you. Me and
I
Lisa
love you.
we got a little history, so I'm excited. I was like, we got to get Lisa on the show.
Yes, we're so excited. Do you want to check in and see how we're doing? So, Lisa, usually for our first segment, we check in, talk about how we're doing, how we're feeling. So I'll start with myself, if you don't mind.
Let's go.
I'm feeling anxious. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm over the moon, just joyful that we have this opportunity to come together again to film for the podcast and also have someone come and share their experience. I'm so looking forward to it. I guess it's anxious in a good way, so I'll take that. How you doing, T-Kea?
I'm feeling, girl, I need the tissue. I'm feeling full.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like just because, yeah, I had a podcast before, but to talk specifically about suicide in the Black community, I just feel like it's so needed. And the fact that I just kind of came up with an idea and I brought it to you, and now we're recording. Now we have Lisa here. I'm just feeling like very full and like emotional, but good though.
And Lisa, how about you? How are you feeling today?
Excited. Continuing my journey of peace. I'm happy. And I'm elated. For you guys, as far as basically this podcast. I drove here to be here with you guys. If anybody knows, driving on BWI.
Yes, the Parkway. Ooh. Yeah, it's brutal. But we're so glad you made it. Yeah, so let's kick off. What's the topic today, T-Kea?
Yeah, so today is a very, well, all of our episodes are important, but it holds a special place in my heart because not only am I a survivor of suicide, I lost my 13-year-old cousin to suicide. And the rate of children, specifically Black children, dying by suicide has gone up a lot. And suicide is the second leading cause of death among children. And the rate for Black children is going up compared to any other race and ethnicity. So today we are going to talk about Black children and suicide. And that's why we have Lisa here to share her story. And Jordan, you want to?
Absolutely. So Lisa, she lost her son to suicide back in 2012. So we wanted to give her an opportunity to be a guest on our podcast and speak about that experience. And Lisa, if you could just tell us a little bit about your son, what was he like?
Sure. So, Ian Alexandria Daughtrey, my son, was overall, and I'll tell you this, learning so much more of what his friends thought of him, not just myself because I was proud of him being my son, but he was a big brother. He was a counselor to others. He was the peacemaker. He was my wildflower child, as I presented, because just a free spirit person. But at the same time, life is heavy for young people now. I'll tell you, I am a single mother. However, I didn't let that discourage me as far as raising my son. I tried my best as far as to ensure that he had the best of everything like everybody else. Um, even, and I'll just tell you, like summertime, he was hardly home. Why? Because I basically ensured that he was at summer camp, some different summer camp every month, for him to basically get along with other people, engage with different, peers. And I'll tell you, because summertime is a time where kids don't have nothing to do.
Right.
With me, it wasn't me trying to, I wanted to make sure that he had a great time. It wasn't spending time trying to figure out at home, watch TV, the same old, same old. So he spent a lot of time as far as overnight camps, which he enjoyed it. I mean, he went to NASA summer camp, he went to 4-H, I just wanted to make sure he had a normal life as a young man. Even enrolled him at our church where he did the Rite of Passage for young men. And throughout the time, I knew, because for me, I was young as well. We go through that iffy stage of trying to identify ourselves, trying to find ourselves. Especially when it comes to, we're almost going into adulthood. But I remember he wanted to have a conversation, and he was like, "Oh, we'll talk about it later." And I was like, "No, let's talk about it now. You know me. We can talk about this." And I think it was at that time he wanted to talk about his depression. But at the same time, I'm one of those mothers who would put on her cape, who would sacrifice herself and ensure whatever he needed, I was going to make sure he had it. Um, so moving fast forward, he went to prom. You would think he was, I mean, it was the best time of his life. I mean, and people say that usually when they make that executive decision, it's like they're happy. Some are happy and some are just, he had the best prom ever. I mean, it was a group of his friends. They went together. I made sure they had, a chauffeur and everything. But 2 weeks later, May 26th, Memorial Weekend, 2012, he died by suicide. And I think he, for him, I think he felt like my mom sacrificed so much. I also remember having a conversation with the elders at the church through the rite of passage. And I remember, and I'm being very transparent, his father had called, and I was very cordial, like, "Hey, you need to talk to your son." He hadn't talked to his son in maybe about 18 years, So my son was very upset with that conversation. It wasn't anything irate or anything like that, but he was just very upset. And I said, "However you feel," I said, "if we need to get on the highway and knock on his door and you express to him how you feel, then we'll do that." I remember the elders were like, he talked to us about that conversation. He said it upset him a lot. And I realized the burden for a young child to feel neglected by another parent, and I say parent, I don't want to say he, she, or whatever, but a parent in general, it affects your child. I don't care how much love I provided for him, how much I assured to him that he's going to be okay or whatever. Unconditional love needs to be from both sides of the fence. And I think for him, he saw me doing everything for him, and his father didn't really do anything for him. But when he called, it was like, it wasn't a call to say, "Hey, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you why I was the way I was." It was more like, "Hey, how you doing?" And that upset my son. I think that pushed him, because he was just like, he's talking to me like he's been talking to me every day. And I'm the type of person who has I'm very, I kept an open door for his father to basically be in his son's life. And, you can't force a person, you can't keep on them. I gave him, like, "Hey, when you're ready, just say the word." this is your child. It's not just my child, it's your child as well. But it's it was very difficult for me because I was like, I beat myself up because I was like, didn't I see what was going on? But I remember my pastor told me, she said he had made an executive decision and he had came to terms and he was at peace with what he decided to do. And I had to find peace. I wasn't mad at him. I wasn't mad at God. I had to find peace and say, you know what? He was dealing with internal pain that I could not help him with. Therapy could help him, but at the same time, he didn't want to do therapy. We did it before, but I think it was just close to the end. He was just like, I'm tired. But I remember at the vigil that his peers had at the high school, and what made this me being a mental health advocate as far as having so much passion for it. We had it out. Well, first we were supposed to have it in auditorium. It became so like now the community wanted to come and be a part of it. So we had it outside on the campus of the high school. And I remember I had told all the peers, I said, some of you have reached out to me personally and I feel your pain. And I was like, come up to me and I'll give you a hug. Well, the hugs started turning into conversations during the vigil. And I was listening to these young people who were dealing with depression, some who had tried to attempt suicide, some who were dealing with so many issues. And that's why I tell adults, I said, us being an adult and we're worried about if we're going to get laid off, how we're going to pay rent, mortgage, how we're going to pay the car note, how we're going to pay bills or whatever. That same intensity that we have, the anxiety that we have, because we have to basically, it's a standard of living for us, breathing and eating and providing for our family. Just think that's the same intensity that young people are dealing with. And it's not just because of what's going on in the household, but also what's outside. Because society is basically showing these young people, hey, you know, it's not that much. I mean, we have war going on. We have a pandemic going on. It's so much going on that affects not just adults, but also kids. And that's what people need to understand. That same anxiety you have with your personal life, they have the same anxiety. It's the same. It's not, it shouldn't even be treated like, oh, you have nothing to worry about. You don't have a job. You don't, no, this is their livelihood.
Yes.
They're unsure about the future because of what society is presenting to them. But at the same time, it's like, how why I'm do what I do now, because I want people to be aware, hey, it's just not a Caucasian thing. It is everybody. It affects everybody. And like I tell people, when you think of suicide, think of it as cancer. Think of it as a heart attack. Think of it as any disease that we deal with on, cardiac arrest, heart disease, everything. That's how we need to be treating suicide. It should not be like, oh, as long as I do this, he's going to be or she's going to be okay. Our children are so closed up as far as expressing themselves, as far as saying, hey, I'm hurting. I don't I don't know how to express I don't know how to cope with what's going on. And I started a program at his high school with the help of his principal, because I said, I need to talk to you about what the conversation I had with these kids during the vigil. And I said, is there something we can do about it? And she was like, Miss Archer, what do you want to do about it? And I said, I want to talk about suicide. I want to talk about mental health with these kids because they're not getting this dialogue. And I said, so what they did was they blocked out for a month, 2 weeks, and we started just with 11th and 12th graders. it wind up every quarter we were doing this till it expanded from just 11th to 12th grade to 9th to 10th to the middle schools. Then when we presented the pilot to the board, I had to do my own testimony in front of the Alexandria Public School Board, and they approved as far as the whole entire school system for the city of Alexandria to have this discussion about mental health and suicide. And I remember when we first did the program, the kids were so attentive, and I remember this young black man was talking, and I'm thinking it was going to be about himself. When we talked about the signs and depression, he realized his mother was going through that, and he was like, "I'm okay, but my mom's not okay." And I remember the counselor took him after we talked about it in front of his peers, and they got help for his mom because it just wasn't about the young people, but also educating the parents, the teachers. So then we extended it not just for the kids. We started having the dialogue with the parents, dialogue with the staff, because the staffs are dealing with depression as well. So from there, I just been trucking as far as doing so much that I can as far as to make sure it's just not just young people, but it's also men. It's women. We're having this dialogue. And I remember when my son had died, and my stepsister was walking in the mall in Englewood, New Jersey. And that's what sort of like just sort of put the more fuel to me. She said, "I saw this poster and it was talking about suicide." And I never saw that poster before. Mind you, this is her neighborhood in Englewood, New Jersey. And this is the first time you've seen that poster. I said, "Sweetie, that poster's been there. It's just you hadn't been paying attention." And she was like, "I didn't know it was this deep." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, so it kept making me think because, and sorry, I was part of a big organization as far as being board of directors. And I got on them because I said, "Hey, when I look at your material, I don't see me. I don't, and if I don't see me, other people don't see themselves." So I said, "We need to change, the material, marketing material." I said, "Then you also need to have more people of color talking about this." I said, "Because if you're international, you're national, international." I was like, who who are you presenting this to? Who is going to pay attention? It's going to be the people they see on this material, because for me, if I don't see me, it's like, oh, it's not about me. It's not about me. But I even just recently, I think what was heavy for me when Regina King lost her son, and how we're mirror image of each other, because her son name is Ian.
Right.
It was just like deja vu. And I'm so glad that how she's taking her journey to find peace, as far as losing her son, because I know the 1 year anniversary just came up. So I know she just did like a lantern of lights as far as releasing lanterns up in honor of her son. So for me, this is just not, I mean, this is my life. This is my lifestyle as far as to talk about mental health. You know, T-Kea, she know, it's just, it has to be talked about. It has to be in our household like we talk about the reality shows. We should have that type of conversation when we talk about mental health.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking for Jordan, when we started the podcast, we were saying the conversations that me and Jordan have privately are the conversations essentially we're just bringing it to the public. This, what we're sharing now is not anything new for any of us in this room. And specifically for Jordan is my confidant when I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts, or I feel like I may need a higher level of care, and saying like, oh, I remember she came with me when I needed to go get a psych eval and to start the PHP program. And it's like, just as if I was to call my mom and say, Mom, I'm having an asthma attack, I have to go to the hospital, like it should be normalized. And that's why we're having this discussion. That's why we just started the podcast, because we want to normalize the conversation about suicide in the Black community. I remember my cousin telling me shortly after I came home from the hospital, and I was sitting in the car with him, and he didn't mean anything. It wasn't like it wasn't like he was trying to be malicious or anything. It's just not having the knowledge. But it was fresh, like it had just happened. And he was like, only white people do that. I didn't have the knowledge that I had now. I was recently diagnosed. I didn't have the courage, or I didn't have a voice at that time, or I didn't find it at that point. And so that's why I'm like, no, we have to talk about it, especially Black people, because we're talking about mental health more, but when you bring up suicide, people still like kind of clutch
It's
their
taboo.
pearls, or like, ooh, let's not talk about
Yeah.
it. But okay, it's great. We're moving along. We're talking about mental health, but what comes along with mental health is the discussion of suicide.
And stop giving excuses for someone who probably died by suicide. I remember I took a taxi to my job. This was years ago. This was like real fresh right after my son had passed. And taxi driver just talking. And it was just by fate, we had a conversation about mental health. And he said, yeah, my boy tried to kill himself. And I was like, okay, Lisa, you're about to get a trigger. And he was like, yeah, and I don't see why he did it, because he has all of us. He had all of us. He didn't know nothing what I was about to say to him, but he was like, I just think he was a coward. And luckily we was pulling up, and I said, you might want to put your car in park for a minute. I said, listen, I just lost my son and he died by suicide. Oh, sister, I'm sorry, but that was your son. So he was giving my son an excuse, but he wasn't giving his friend an excuse. And I said, no, no, no. I said, your friend was in pain, and yet he had all of you. But did you pay attention to what he had probably said to you? I said, because now I said, he attempt suicide. He'll try again. I said, are you going to be there for him then? I said, but please don't call him a coward. I said, how are you going to help him so that he doesn't try it again? I said, but he wasn't a coward. I said, life is heavy. And I said, if you get into a rabbit hole and you can't get out that rabbit hole, you keep pulling up and you keep sliding back down. I said, just imagine a person. I said, depression is not straight. I said, it's up and down. And I said, it depends on how a person copes. It depends if that person can pull himself up, elevate themselves a little bit more so they can, move on. But if they can't and they spiral down, guess what? They're not going to spiral down to the place where they just left off. They're going to spiral down a little bit more deeper. How are you going to help that person? And I remember, because it's like now, when you become a mental health and you start reading articles, you start getting certifications and stuff. So you get a little bit more educated. And I remember I was sitting at the nail salon and I was watching the sister. It was just her body language was saying so much. And I said, how was your day? And she's like, excuse me? And I was like, how was your day? And she said, oh, it was okay. I said, no. I said, how was your day? I said, how are you? And she just like, you could just see the relief off her, because then she dropped that shell, that defense. And she said, you know what? This was what's happened to me today at work, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay. I said, but you know what? I said, we're going to take baby steps. Tomorrow we're going to take baby steps. We don't need to take no huge step. We don't need to act like it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. I said, but we're going to take baby steps and we're going to get better, right? And it was like she went from slouch to feeling like, okay, I just got some weight off of me. And I told her, I said, it is okay to not be okay. And I said, it's okay if you go to a therapist just to talk about it. I mean, I went to a therapist prior to all the event that happened, with my son. And it was because I needed to deal with family matters. But then when me trying to be superwoman, I remember my girlfriend pulled me at my son's repast and she said, sis, when you're ready, I got a therapist for you. And I was like, okay. But it wasn't, I was in denial, but it was like, I was like this right now. That's all I could see was straight ahead. And I remember I had an anxiety attack when I was trying to run in the park. And I felt my heart through my ears. And I was like, okay, Lisa, just try to breathe, try to get yourself together. And I said, okay, yeah, it's time. It happened twice. I said, yeah, I need to go see a therapist because I don't like this. I don't like how I couldn't get my breathing together. And it just was like, you know, and I remember when I started therapy, and I'll tell people, I said, you may not talk to your therapist, maybe one or two, three sessions or whatever. I said, but continue to go. I said, I remember I cried every time sitting in her chair that my waste basket was just full of tissue. I emptied out the box. But when I finally started relieving myself, I was able to talk to her. And it was the best thing I ever did. And yeah, I did some crazy thing because she was like, how are you going to, move forward from here? And I remember I was turning a significant age a few months after that. And I said, you know what? I said, I had promised him that when he graduate, we're going to go skydiving. And she said, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go skydiving. When I'm telling you, I jumped out that plane and I was I was laughing. I was, for a moment, I felt my connection with him, but at the same time, I was free. And nothing mattered for what was happening at that moment. Yeah, that free fall is something else, but for me, my girlfriend has said, I heard you laughing from the ground. She's like, I knew you were feeling some kind of way. I was like, I feel free. I don't feel like, the anxiety is gone, but at the same time, I feel a little bit freer from what the grievance. Not saying, and I'll tell you, grievance stays with you. It's like just like depression. You have your moments where you can deal with it, and there's moments well you just go have to cry. But that was like my point where I said, you know what, I'm gonna be okay, and I'm gonna continue to take baby steps till I feel better. I can talk about them. And I always tell people, I said, when you have somebody that passed away, let that person feel free and feel comfortable that they can talk about their loved one because that person meant so much to them. Not for you to look like, why is she talking about him or why is she talking about her? That person was here on earth, and mattered to that person. So, T-Kea, I mean, you know, whenever you want to talk about him, talk about him. I mean, because he meant a lot to you.
Mhm. It's so interesting when you talked about how you were feeling free when you, I guess, as you was like falling
Yeah.
out of the plane, but just in terms of, or jumped out of the plane, like how much liberty or like what that symbolizes because like just as a child when you talk about children, like you talked about you as a mom walking around like kind of superwoman with a cape, but then also imagine children wearing their own little capes and trying to put on a mask and acting
Yes.
like they're okay.
Mhm.
And
And
it,
taking on responsibilities they don't need to take on as a
Right.
child.
Right.
You know, I used to tell my son, I said, don't worry about what, you know, what's going on. I said, I just need you to be in at the age that you are. You don't need to take on any responsibilities. Just be you, you know, because kids do at times take on adult responsibilities. And we don't see it. We just think, oh yeah, they're, intelligent, whatever. No, no. You got to let a child be a child, you know. And especially with this, what's going on now, I don't want a child to think they have to grow up so fast, and now they have to deal with the world. No. I don't like the world, you know. So just imagine a child looking at through TV, through the family situation, through when they go to school, you know. And it's so, I feel for young people that are bullied. Uh, Social media is out of control now with these videoing, you watching a child being beat up, or just, I'm just like, what happened to stopping the fight, or where you're pushing a person to the point where they want to take their lives? I just, I don't understand. I really don't understand. And I
Hey,
used to
Black
tell,
People Die by Suicide 2 podcast. Me and Jordan are here. We have some very exciting news for you all. We are having our very first event called Black and Suicidal, the rise of suicide in the Black community. So if you are in the Prince George's County, Maryland area, DC, we're having a panel discussion that will include myself as well as Jordan. We are also partnering with a resting place counseling, where the lead therapist and CEO is Courtney Anderson. And we are also partnering with one of our former guest on the podcast, Graceland Therapeutics, and the amazing Jillian Pelzer. So we cannot wait for you all to be a part of this event. And so I'm going to let Jordan share more details about that.
Yes, come and see us on July 30th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Hyattsville Branch Library. And that's at 6530 Adelphi Road, Hyattsville, Maryland, 20782. We hope to catch you guys there.
Yes, and you can get your tickets
At
on
Eventbrite.
Yes, on Eventbrite, you can get your tickets. And if you are not able to come, please feel free to leave us a donation. All of the ticket sales, as well as any donations that we receive, it will go toward preventing suicide within the Black community. So you all have been great with supporting the podcast and engaging with us on social media. So if you are wanting to get a little bit more involved, please feel free to either make a donation or get a ticket. And we look forward to seeing you all at the event.
and I used to tell, I remember, I had one of the students who was a cutter, and she was being bullied. And I remember she called me from the bathroom in the high school, and she said, they won't leave the bathroom. And the girl told me to go ahead and cut myself until I bleed out. And I remember telling parents, stop telling a child they're cutting themselves because they want attention. They're cutting themselves because they're in pain. Just imagine the eternal pain they're feeling. So the only way they can relieve themselves is to cut themselves. That's going to stop them from thinking about that emotion that they're dealing with. The cutting is not for attention. It's basically to numb themselves. So it's just, we have to continue this fight as far as advocating mental health, advocating, dealing with suicide, because I remember when my first radio interview, and aunt had called because her niece, who was a honor roll student, hung herself. And that, I'm sitting there like trying to get myself together to talk, but then I'm listening to this conversation. I'm just like, how old was she? She was 13. So, and it's not even in that age bracket. We have children who are starting at 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mind blowing to me because their mind is so fragile at 5.
Mm-hmm.
So for a child at 5 who don't want to be here, it's just, I still, when I see the ages, it bothers me. It really does.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I identify with a lot of things that both of you have said. Me personally, I never attempted suicide, but I've sat there many, many nights holding a bottle of pills in my hand, ready to end it all. I've been hospitalized technically 5 times, twice inpatient, and I've done 3 day programs for severe depression and suicidal thoughts. And a lot of what both of you said really resonated with me.
And I would say this about depression, there's levels of depression. So when people think of depression, they're like, oh, I'll never get to that. You've dealt with depression.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has dealt with depression. It just depends on what level you're dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are like, oh, I'm fine, you've dealt with depression. All of us have.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on how you cope with that level.
Right.
So
I'm so glad you brought that up because I do say that it's levels to this because it's mild, moderate, severe. There are some people who they're going through life and they may not even realize it.
they're functioning.
Right, they're functioning. And then there's other people who just be like, I can't, they can't function, but that doesn't mean one is less important than the other. But I think if we catch it when it's at a milder stage, it's much easier to
Right.
kind of get out of it opposed to when you like down in the dumps. And when you talked about kind of going back to what you said, Jordan, about how you sat there like many nights, like with pills and stuff. And it's so interesting because I'm tying it together with both of y'all said, and you talked about how kids being so young. Like I was in middle school thinking about taking pills and, had my attempt in my early 20s. But I remember being a child. I probably was like 14 and I was in the bathroom and I just had these pills and I didn't do anything, but I was just really contemplating as a kid. And so many times parents will think like, "Oh, that would never happen to my kid," or
Exactly.
and it's like we can act like it don't exist if we don't want to, especially us, black people. Like
Right.
suicide is taking our kids out and they're dropping like flies.
And I wish when we have these conversations, instead of people saying, oh, well, my kid is fine, sit down because you don't know what your kid is going through. Yes, you probably had conversations, I'm sorry, talked about, you know, dynamics of different things. But at the same time, there's times when your child has probably been depressed. And like I said, there's levels to it. You don't know what they've been through, but they've somehow been able to get out of it. Um, I will always tell people it's good to have a good support, but it's also as well as have a good therapist.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not happy with the therapist that you currently have, or you just don't seem to vibe with them, find another one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wh- I love that we have a lot of brothers and sisters now who are going into the mental health, um, as far as behavioral and as far as field, because children and people in general of color need to see someone like themselves to sit down and have the dialogue to talk about, hey, this wasn't a good day. And I'll tell you, I remember I'll have sometimes I might need a tune up, as I call it,
Mm-hmm.
because I might be dealing with stuff or whatever. And I remember this was after my son had passed away and I had moved to another project. Well, I was working 2 projects at the same time, being split into 2 people for the same consulting firm, and I didn't like the way how they was treating me. And I remember I had found a sister that was at least 2 blocks from me. When I'm telling you, I was so happy. 3 o'clock would get here, pack my stuff up, and walk down there. Uh, just because I needed that moment to have the conversation about work, if it was work related or how I felt or whatever. But just I needed her
Mhm.
to really deal with what I was dealing with at work. It was just, and it just wasn't me, but other women too. But it was just like, okay, I'm so glad you're right down the street, because when I see what time it is, I start packing my stuff up. I gotta go, and I'm happy to sit right here and have conversations with you. You need to have a therapist where you vibe with,
Mhm.
Right.
um, because if you're not comfortable as far as having a conversation, or you feel like that person's not really providing you input or helping you, guiding you with, helping you provide coping skills, just find another person.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? I actually wanted to just kind of go back a little bit to talk about what would you say to parents who have I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this.
Just say it.
What would you say to to other parents who children may have attempted suicide or they lost their children to suicide? What words of encouragement or wisdom like would you impart upon them?
Um, I would say love that child unconditionally. And at the same time, and as I always tell people, one attempt does not mean that will be the only attempt.
That is true.
Mhm.
You have to be so proactive with your child. Um, and as a child, young adult, but continue to have the conversation. I mean, because sometimes they just zone out, and you've got to pay attention. Not saying you got to be the helicopter parent,
Mhm.
but you just got to pay attention. Like, okay, you know what? I see he's zoning out. They don't want to deal with stuff. Let me how can I bring them back here?
Mhm.
Um, just continue to have that conversation. I know it was easier for some kids, students, to have conversation with me, but then I tried to position it so that they can have that conversation with their parent. And I had to tell their parents, I said, you know what? You have to realize that they're very smart, that their feelings matter. You can't push, or just be like, you're gonna be all right. It's that's just it's nothing really. Take everything they say for word
Mhm.
seriously. Um, I remember, and I'm gonna say his name, but he was a cutter, but his parents were going through a divorce. None of the family members knew that they were going through divorce. Everybody assumed they were still together. But inside the home, the father was like getting on him about, oh, you're just doing this for attention or whatever. And I had to have like a conversation with him and a conversation with her. I said, look, he talks to me because I don't judge him. I let him talk. I listen, and what he says matters. I said, you chasing him, telling him, you're doing this for attention. Um, you're fine. And another thing, don't what your child need is your love. It doesn't need a car. They don't need clothes or whatever. They need your attention, your love. They need to know that, hey, my mom really cares about what's going on with me. They don't need to see you pushing that feeling aside and say, here's some clothes, some new clothes, and new shoes or whatever. They don't need that. They need your attention. They need your love. They need to have that dialogue with you. And I remember I had talked to the mother and I said, look, I I have my own life, but at the same time, because he calls me, I listen to him and I give him the attention that he needs. He needs that from both of you. And I said, he knows you two fight. I said, he probably knows that you two are divorced and you're just not being honest with him. I said, can you just sit down with him and let him talk and express himself, and you be open to actually listen to what he has to say without judging him? And I mean, finally, and we follow each other when we speak to each other and everything, but still, he's doing much better. But it's just sometimes I think we as adults get so caught up in what we're doing that we don't take time for just to say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take a day or two, or need to take a week with my family so we can spend time together, or evenings or whatever. You just need to block out some time and spend that time with your child.
Yeah, and going back to what you said before about minimizing, because I felt like me and Jordan talked about this before. A lot of times we're kids, and I feel like it was done to me too. Like, oh, you're a child. Like, talk to me when you got bills, when you gotta worry about paying off
Exactly.
debt, when you got, like, but at the same time, not realizing as kids, like, we still, at the time, like, we still have our own little lives going on
Right.
outside of the home. And I feel like a lot of times adults tend to minimize what children are going through just because it seems small to them, but not realizing it's big to a child because that's all the life that they know.
I remember walking in the hallway to go to the office, school office, and I'm hearing all this dialogue with the, the young kids, just having with each other. And I was just like, wow, this is, I was like, just listening to little bits, but I'm busy trying to rush because I'm like, this is a lot that I'm listening to, just trying to get to the office. And that's when I realized, I said, you know what? I said, they have lives. I said, we need to stop pinch holding them, thinking, oh, like you said, you don't have bills. What are you worried about? You get a meal, you get 3 meals a day. Like, hey, there's some kids who don't get 1 or 2 meals per day. And they're dealing with, they don't know if they're going to live in the same place tomorrow or next month. That's a lot a child has to deal with. It's a multitude of things that a young person is dealing with today. But as I always tell parents when I talk to them, I said, please address your child with their concerns, just like how you want an adult to address you. Don't put it like, oh, you're fine. We take care of you. Yeah, you take care of them, but do you really know what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to add anything?
Yeah, 11 years almost
Mm.
later. How do you honor Ian?
Wow. I just recently, because his birthday was in November, so I did a tattoo. Well, I have several, but this tattoo and another one, um, I honor him, but also I'm starting a new foundation. It's called Be Easy. And it's just not just for young people, but it's people of color. And I honor him as well as some I've done where I've done balloons, um, roses, in the lake, ocean, skydiving, um, just I will never forget him because that was my child. I gave birth to him. So he's in my memory every day. I would say this now. I have a very special person in my life. My godson. My godson is named after my son. And it was funny because Nathan, Nathan Ian, um, he has Ian's middle name. I think Nathan Ian Alexander. But I met his mom because my son was basically her only like closest friend. She was a young mother in high school, and Ian befriended her. And when everybody was shaming her for being a young mother, pregnancy and everything, and I remember she called me and she was crying, but she was just telling me all the things that he'd done for her. And I remember when he showed me the picture of Nathan, and I was like, "This your child?" And he was like, "No, mom, this is my friend's child, but I would like to go see her, and everything." And it just, when he died by suicide, all that happened. But remember when I was talking to her, and I remember I called her back the next day and I said, "Can I ask you something?" And she said, "What?" And I said, um, "I believe Ian would have been, Nathan's godfather." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you mind if I'm his godmother?" And she was like, "I was thinking the same thing." And like, that's my heart.
Mhm.
Nathan,
Mhm.
I love him with all my heart, and he means the world to me. And to share and to discuss as far as who Ian was, and then for me being the godmother who jumps out, do skydiving, do all of this. So it's like for him, yeah, I have the cape on. I'm the take and tell to school type of person because he's like, yeah, my godmother skydived, hey, so look, what do you do? But I honor him every day. He's on my mind every day,
Mhm.
every day, every day.
And I mean, we're social media friends on.
Right.
So, like, Lisa lives her life. She's always traveling. Like, every time I log on to Facebook, she's in another place, or she's sitting in the airport, or it's like Lisa's traveling from here to here. So I could tell that. Would you say that that's part of honoring your son, is like living
Yes.
your life and enjoying it?
Yes, I remember he has two best friends, and I remember Jericho had told me, he said, "Mom, I need you to live life. I need you to continue to live your life." And I do. I'm gonna tell you, travel for me has been very therapeutic, um, from the beginning. So it's like that's like you said, you see me in a different airport or I'm in a country somewhere, I'm enjoying myself. I love traveling. But at the same time, I love to talk about mental health with people.
Mhm.
It's not like, oh, I need your attention to talk about it, but if I see someone, I always ask them. It's just now I could just sort of tell when people are going through something, and I try to ensure to that person, hey, there's somebody out here who cares about you.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I was looking at a T-shirt yesterday that says "Be kind." I think to in society we need to be kind.
Mhm.
Um, Stop thinking that it's not going to happen to me. Mental health, and especially suicide, it it doesn't happen to you. It may not happen to you directly. It may happen to you indirectly,
Mhm.
and you need people around you. It could affect them. It could trigger them. So that's why I said be kind. You know.
Mhm. Absolutely. Is there anything else you want to ask Lisa? I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to ask Lisa.
I was like, I got a little teary eyed talking about Nathan, but
It's okay. It's okay. I was over here tearing too. Like, I was just like, we need to have some tissues on standby next time. But I think we can move to the next segment. We always have a resource segment where we share resources. But on this episode, we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to call it like the honoree segment, where we are going to honor Black children who died by suicide. So I'll let Jordan.
Yes. Okay. Let me breathe. I know we're gonna have to edit this out. That's fine. Let me just breathe.
Mm, take your time, babe.
Mhm.
Maybe I should just tell y'all so I can get it out.
Mhm.
But looking at all these kids' faces when I was trying to find people that died by suicide, like, and they're all so young.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's
So
okay.
sorry.
Girl, you don't have to apologize.
Ugh.
This is a very,
Yeah.
this is hard.
So as T-Kea said, we're going to honor the remembrance of children who have passed by suicide. We're going to start with Ian Daughtrey. He's 18 years old from Alexandria, Virginia. Pronounce your cousin's name for me.
Yes, Holmes.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I just want to make sure. Let me go back. So as T-Kea mentioned, we're going to honor children who have passed by suicide. And this is our way of remembering them and cherishing, the life they had. We'll just start with Ian Daughtrey. He was 18 years old from Alexandria, Virginia. Holmes, 13 years old from Charlotte, North Carolina. Imani McCray, 8 years old from Newark, New Jersey. Ashanti Davis, 10 years old from Aurora, Colorado. Jeffrey Taylor, 7 years old from San Antonio, Texas. Gabriel Taye, 8 years old from Cincinnati, Ohio. McKenzi Adams, 9 years old from Linden, Alabama. Madison Whittsett, 9 years old from Birmingham, Alabama. Jamari Williams, 10 years old from Montgomery, Alabama. And Seven Bridges, 10 years old from Louisville, Kentucky.
And if that doesn't bring awareness, I really don't know what does. I don't know how many names you just listed, but that's why the podcast is so important. That's why just in general, we need to talk about it. Stop acting like it's not a thing because it is a thing. And just what they say, call a cat or call a spade
Call
a
a thing a
spade.
thing.
Call a thing a thing.
Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
So when we have an incident where someone dies by suicide, the momentum is so high at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, boom, we have to talk about it. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. You hear people talking about it, whatever. But then it dies out.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, we should not be doing that.
Right.
We have to, and I keep saying this, and I don't think people really understand it. We got to continue to have this dialogue like we talk about everything else. It shouldn't be this week we talk about it because it's a celebrity or it's somebody in the community. But then it's like it just sizzles out
Mm-hmm.
and then we're back to normal.
Right.
Like, oh, yeah, here we go.
Right.
Monday.
It's
Right.
over.
Let, you know, what are you doing? When are we going to brunch? What are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue to have that conversation because I'm telling you, someone out there wants to talk about it, but they're so afraid to talk about it because they hear someone say something negative or or derogatory,
Mm-hmm.
and it just has this person close up till they're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
They're suffering by themselves alone, and then we'll be like, oh, here's another one. Then someone, I sometimes, and I'm sorry, I hate these little cliche phrases that people, I don't even want to mention none of them, but it's just, when someone died by suicide, it's like, oh, wrap your arm around your children.
Right.
I'm just like, is can we stop saying that? Can we stop saying the other phrases? It's like it's these little cliches or phrases that people say when it happens. And I'm just like, how can we prevent this?
Exactly.
How can we I need to check on your strong friends or check on your friends.
Right.
How about we just do it?
Right. It shouldn't have to be something happened, doing it just because. And I feel like because of that, I want to add a plug in for mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid, which is a course that I facilitate, and it teaches parents or community members, how you identify,
Excellent.
recognize the signs and the symptoms
Mhm.
of mental health and substance use challenges when you not just identify them, but also how do you actually best support them. A lot of times we think we're saying things right, but we're actually making, we have the best intentions,
Right.
Mhm.
but because we don't have the education, we're actually doing things to make it worse.
Mhm.
So whether you take youth mental health first aid with me or someone else, it is a course that I highly recommend that you take because you will be glad that you did.
Mhm.
And I think the last thing that we want to do before we wrap up, we always leave out with a moment of inspiration. But because we've talked about children and suicide, what we want to leave with is giving I guess, a charge or a call of action to parents. Talk to your kids, talk to them about mental health, talk to them about suicide. We'll have some resources in the show notes, in the YouTube description, so that way you are able to refer back to what to do or courses that you can take. But we just want to give you the charge to talk to your kids about mental health and talk to them about suicide.
Check in with them and just be ready to listen to whatever they have to say. Don't be dismissive. Don't tell them that how they're feeling isn't important. Just have an open mind, an open discussion with them. You may be very surprised at what you learn and may be able to help your children. It's really important. And I'm just hoping and praying that I won't have to read another child's name.
And I love the title.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you love the title. Well, that wraps up this episode, and we look forward to catching y'all on the next episode. This episode was sponsored by the Mental Health Empowerment Agency, where its mission is to dismantle the mental health stigma and raise awareness of suicide prevention through curated events, individual and group peer support, digital and social media, and educational trainings.